better not still be doing that dumbass bit, bro. What the fuck even is that?
Despite your power,
I am stronger and stronger.
I despise such ignorance.
Begin.
I returned to find Kandar devastated from Brainiac's attack. My beloved queen was dead. I brought her broken body to the Lazarus pits, intent on her resurrection. But my entry was blocked by Raish and Ghoul. He offered its trade, access to the pits in exchange for my aid in bringing him to power. Raish admired Superman's regime, but felt it should have gone further. While I have no love for Raish, I accepted his terms. I would pay any price to again feel the embrace of my dearest wife.
So good.
You think you can toss me a cake?
Hey, welcome back to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 gave us a great send-off to the OG Guardians, but it teased an even bigger journey for Mantis, the Guardian that a lot of us have taken for granted.
Quill, Groot, Drax, the chick with the antenna, all gone.
So, if you're gonna go off the comic source material, Mantis is going to play a huge role in Avengers Secret Wars and could be the key to creating a new Marvel Cinematic Universe. And we've got videos out now about the next big cosmic crossover, Star-Lord crossing over with the X-Men and the Eternals, and what's next for the Warlock movie, but we have been saving this one because this story is all about culminating the multiverse saga. See, Volume 3 ended with Mantis leaving on a journey of self-discovery. So, let's talk about what adventures lie ahead for Mantis and how her journey connects to Kang, Secret Wars, and the X-Men, and how she may be on the path to becoming the MCU's Celestial Madonna.
And I am a material dog.
Different Madonna, but more on that in a bit. So in Guardians 3, we hear Mantis talk about how her whole life she served Ego. Now remember that Mantis, like Star-Lord, is also a child of Ego the Living Planet, who is also a Celestial. Her whole life she served Ego's will. Remember, she was one of Ego's many, many children that Yondu delivered to him. Ego hoped that one of his kids would have a Celestial spark inside of them that would have allowed him to trigger the expansion. Ego killed the kids that were of no use to him, but kept Mantis because her abilities helped him to sleep. That info for later. After joining the Guardians, she has been a loyal member of the team, but never made her own decisions. So she ends Volume 3, leaving to go find herself and do what she wants to do. So basically, a journey of self-discovery, similar to the journey that we think we'll see Adam Warlock go on, which we talked about in this video. And by the way, everybody, I just want to show off this really cool Doug as Rocket tee, which is available in our merch store. Really fun character. She's adorable. We have tons of fun tees and gear that I think you'll like, and shopping our merch store is a great way that you can directly support our channel. So check it out with the link below. Now back to Mantis. In the MCU, she has been a really fun character. She's adorable, funny, and the way her and Drax carried the holiday special was phenomenal. We even finally got to see her fight and brilliantly combine her empathic abilities with action. But I think it's fair to say that the MCU's version of the Mantis character has yet to reach her fullest potential. Co-creator of the Mantis character, Steve Englehart, has even said that he was not pleased with the MCU's take on Mantis, at least in Volume 2. He said, "I was not happy with Mantis' portrayal."
Wait, is he French or something?
No, I just tried to do a voice.
Don't, just read it. Just be normal.
Okay, I was not happy with Mantis' portrayal. That character has nothing to do with Mantis. I will say that I like the film quite a lot overall. They're doing good stuff, and I really enjoyed my night at the movies, so long as I turned my brain off to the fact that that's not Mantis up there. I really don't know why you would take a character who is as distinctive as Mantis is and do a completely different character and still call her Mantis. That I do not know. Now, personally, I've loved what the MCU has done with Mantis, but I can understand why Englehart felt this way about his baby. But with the direction they seem to be taking Mantis after Guardians 3, I think that Englehart may be happy with what's to come for the character. Like Mantis said, she needs to find herself. So we need to remember that she has yet to become her true self and still has a lot of growing to do as a character.
So in the comics, whenever she was a big bird that eats boys or something?
Oh, buddy, you have no idea this is about to get weird. So Mantis was first introduced in 1973's Avengers 112. Now in the comics, we see Mantis taken and mutated by the Kree. The Kree being the enormous alien empire that we've met several times before in the MCU.
Whoa. Hey, wait. Did you say mutated?
Oh yeah, Mantis is what's known in the comics as a mutate, not to be confused with mutant. Mutants possess the mutant X gene. Those who have the mutant X gene typically see it activate around the same time they hit puberty, giving them a special ability, aka superpowers. Mutates, on the other hand, are individuals who aren't born with their mutation, but are mutated by an outside source, such as being bit by a radioactive spider, getting hit with gamma radiation, or being injected with super soldier serum. Now, we've done a few videos theorizing that the MCU may have a different take on mutants in the comics. After all, Marvel Studios was not able to use or even mention mutants in their projects until Phase 4 of the MCU. And with a character like Ms. Marvel, who is not a mutant in the comics, suddenly being revealed to be a mutant in the MCU, like a mutation. We think it's possible that we could see the MCU reclassify all enhanced beings with altered DNA as mutants. Or maybe they were just trying to get us excited for the X-Men by doing a very confusing retcon of Kamala's powers. So, back to Mantis' comic history. The Kree believed that Mantis would become what's known as the Celestial Madonna.
Just like Pear, you're gonna take Doug there.
Doug, no, not that Madonna.
Why you yelling at me? You're the one who said Madonna. It's like Madonna sometimes.
No, Celestial Madonna. Let's break down Celestial Madonna and what that means for Mantis. Now, a Celestial is essentially a god.
Small G, son.
Ego was a Celestial, and we've seen a slew of Celestials such as Erisham and the Eternals movie. Now, a Madonna is essentially an idealized goddess that gives birth to a savior. So take Mary, the mother of Jesus, as an example of a Madonna.
Or, Marilyn Feige.
Or Kevin Feige's mother, Marilyn, sure. But what's interesting about that is in the MCU, Mantis's mother could be viewed as a Mary-type figure. Ego, who is essentially God, impregnated Mantis's mom to give Ego an heir and to help him accomplish his expansion. Now, I know that Guardians 2 is not at the top of anybody's MCU rankings, but it is very important to look back at that movie to understand what's next for Mantis and how she will affect the multiverse saga. The Guardians Holiday Special gave us a reminder that Mantis is indeed a daughter of Ego, the same way Star-Lord is his son, thus making Star-Lord and Mantis half-brother and sister. And while that was a heartwarming moment for the Christmas special, they were definitely using this as an opportunity to remind fans of Mantis' celestial origins.
Hey, Pearson, I got a question.
Doug, I already told you, the Celestial Madonna did not launch the Blonde Ambition tour.
No, not that. The Star-Lord was the only one of Ego's spawn that inherited his celestial powers, right?
Yes.
And Star-Lord lost those powers when he destroyed Ego?
That's right.
So why does Mantis still have her powers and Star-Lord doesn't?
Okay, that's a great question, and actually a question that I've heard a few times before. There are a few possible explanations for this. One, that Mantis' empathic abilities in the MCU don't even come from Ego. Mantis may in fact be an MCU mutate or a mutant, and it could be a mere coincidence that she also happens to be the daughter of a Celestial. Now, in Guardians 2, we learn via a bet between Star-Lord and Drax that Mantis' antennae are connected to her empathic abilities.
They have something to do with my empathic abilities.
In the MCU, it is yet to be confirmed what species Mantis is. So we can't say for certain that this ability isn't shared amongst all the people of her species. It could be revealed that Mantis is unique among her people, however, and that her antennae are a mutation similar to how Namor's wings are his mutation. But in the deleted scene for Guardians 2, we do see Mantis' mom with Ego, and she too has antennae. So it's likely that all of her species have antennae and they are all empaths. Or perhaps they all have different abilities which they use their antennae for, such as telepathy, precognition, or telekinesis. That's option one. Option two, Mantis' abilities do come from being Ego's daughter, but unlike Peter, the celestial light within her did not die when Ego was destroyed. See, we already know that Mantis and Peter are very different. Peter was able to start the expansion, and he had powers. Mantis had abilities, but not the right combination of powers to help start the expansion. So it is possible that Mantis' abilities are connected to the power of the Celestials. And if that's the case, the celestial light is still alive within her. Remember that for later. Okay, so now I have to talk about Kang and how he connects to this in a big way. In the comics, Kang finds out about this whole Celestial Madonna prophecy of the creeps, and he decides that he wants to have a child with Mantis, making him the father of the space messiah, or in other words, God. So we see Kang romantically pursuing Mantis, and this is when she learns that she's destined to become the Celestial Madonna. Now, we don't have time to break down the entire story, which spanned across several different comic titles. It is, however, really fun and very weird. At one point, it even features Mantis marrying Tony Dalton's character from Hawkeye in a wedding that's officiated by a Mortis. The MCU has obviously taken these characters down different paths. But there is one weird story in the comics that I do want to talk about, and that is when Mantis gets blown up and pieces of herself are spread across the universe, and each piece represents a different side of Mantis. Think of it kind of like the Council of Sheldons.
Where's Jock Sheldon?
Eventually, these Mantis find each other and reconnect, forming the one true Mantis, and she accepts her role as a Celestial Madonna. And that's what I think we're going to see happen in the MCU. Instead of Mantis being blown up into different versions of herself across the universe, I think we'll see Mantis meet variants of herself from the multiverse. After all, at the end of Guardians 3, we do see Mantis leaving with her new pets, the Avalis.
Oh yeah, what's that again? Who are they again? What's that?
Alright, buddy, so we see the Guardians fighting one of these monsters at the start of Volume 2, because they were trying to protect the Sovereign Space Batteries from these monsters who eat batteries. Now, in that movie, we learned that these animals can travel through different dimensions. Basically, they're creatures with the ability to travel the multiverse like America Chavez. And in Volume 3, Mantis makes an empathic connection to them. So, when Mantis leaves, she's going off on a journey to find herself. But what if she literally finds variants of herself in other universes? And what if these variants are all different metaphorical species of a multiversal Celestial Madonna? Perhaps we could even learn that the multiverse once had a celestial goddess that created said multiverse. And maybe the Council of Kangs, that's the multiversal team of Kangs that rule the multiverse, maybe they blew up that Celestial Madonna to take over the multiverse. And when they blew her up, pieces of her were scattered throughout the multiverse, just like when Mantis was blown up in the comics.
Yeah, that's pretty.
You know what the greatest thing about America is? What? Babies.
Yeah, when they blew her up, pieces of her were scattered throughout the multiverse, just like when Mantis was blown up in the comics.
Yeah, that's pretty weird, man.
Yeah, but Kang did something similar in the comics. So in the books, his true love was Ravonna Renslayer, who of course we met in Loki. And in the comics, Ravonna kept getting reincarnated in different eras and then dying in Kang's arms. So it turns out that in the distant future, Kang can actually send her essence back through all of time to give himself endless chances to save her life. And instead, he had to watch her die thousands of times. Kang could have done something similar with Mantis in the MCU, meaning that our Mantis is just one of many Manti in many different universes. And each Mantis represents a different aspect of the Celestial Madonna that once was. Think of it like the 9 pieces of 8 from the Pirates of the Caribbean. The 9 pieces of 8 were used by the pirate lords to confine the goddess Calypso to a human form. But when the pieces were brought together and burned, it returned Calypso to her true form. So perhaps that is what the Kang who eventually becomes He Who Remains is trying to do. Capture all the Mantis from across the multiverse, combine them, and restore the Celestial Madonna.
Why would he want to do that?
Well, okay, remember, look, and I know this gets a little confusing, but the Kang we met in Quantum Mania is the enemy of the Council of Kangs.
Okay, yeah, I'm drawing a blank.
Alright, so here's a quick refresher on the MCU's Kang. He Who Remains, the Kang that we met in the finale of Loki Season 1, he was once a Kang. He wiped out all of his variants and ended the multiversal war, created the sacred timeline, and became the ruler of the multiverse. But after his death in Loki, we saw the sacred timeline collapse. Now, in this moment, billions, if not trillions of years of time began to pass all at once. Past, present, and future all happened instantaneously. This is why in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, we see a council of Kangs ruling a vast multiverse. And the Kang that's trapped in the quantum realm is seeking to destroy his other variants, as well as wipe out all these extra timelines. He is the Kang who we think eventually will become He Who Remains. We did a whole theory video about that. It was pretty great.
An infinite amount of the start another multiversal war, and I just end up right back here anyways.
So, then we have Mantis.
I am Mantis.
Who is half goddess with her celestial genes. She is the daughter of a being that had the ability to create galaxies and suns. So Kang would want to use this Celestial Madonna's power to conquer the multiverse, or maybe to create a new universe.
So wait, then how is Mantis around at the same time as He Who Remains, but they put all the pieces ever back together to conquer the multiverse?
Bro, when you say things like at the same time, you have to remember that time is relative when we discuss the multiverse and variant timelines. He Who Remains exists outside of time and has constructed the sacred timeline in a circular motion that occurs again and again and again.
And it happens again and again and again because it's supposed to.
Think of it like you're looking at lots of different save files on your computer and you can access any of them at any time. So we have theorized that his plan all along may be for the multiversal war to happen again and again and again. And the war happens the exact same way every time so that he always ends up back on top. But it's also possible that after Kang used the Celestial Madonna's power, he then broke her up back into pieces and re-scattered her across the sacred timeline so that she couldn't be used as a threat against him and his rule.
Person?
Yeah, buddy?
Yeah, I missed the 6 rainbow rocks.
Those were simpler times.
Before the dark times.
But stay with me here. This is where the Mantis theory gets really, really good. So, we keep using the term Celestial Madonna like she's destined to give birth to a space baby messiah.
That's right, that is good.
But what if, instead of her giving birth to a literal space baby, instead she gives metaphorical birth to a new universe?
Last one.
Okay, so look, in Kang Dynasty, all the heroes are going to face off against Kang and will probably lose like they did in Infinity War. And then Kang will successfully create a new universe. This movie is followed up by Avengers Secret Wars. In the comic book Secret Wars, the multiverse ended and Doom created a new world where he was God. In the MCU Secret Wars, that's probably going to be Kang. And this new world will have all the variants from all the other Marvel movies from over the years, the TV shows and stuff. Very fun. But after Kang is defeated, the heroes are going to have to create a new universe or a new multiverse. In the comics, this was the work of Franklin Richards and the Molecule Man. But in the movies, I think this is going to be the work of Mantis. Because she has the power of the Celestials inside of her, she is the only hero who would have the actual ability to create new universes. After all, the Celestials do create galaxies, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So, Mantis' celestial powers have been scattered across the multiverse. Once they're combined again in Secret Wars, she will be able to provide the energy to give birth to a new universe. Hence, the Celestial Madonna.
That is extremely cool.
Thank you, high five. But hey, if you're ever feeling confused or have questions about the Multiverse Saga, Screen Crush is the place to be.
I'm so confused. These are confusing times.
We're going to give you theories and insights to help you better understand and overall enjoy everything the MCU has coming up. So let me know, do you think Mantis is on her way to discovering that she is indeed the Celestial Madonna? Will Kang use her to not give birth to an heir, but to a sacred timeline that he can control? And could we see Mantis be responsible for giving rise to a brand new universe after Secret Wars that will reset X-Men and the Marvel Multiverse. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below or tap me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.
Scarecrow.
Let's make a canary cry.
Hey, welcome to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy, and let's talk about the Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 wrapped up things pretty perfectly for all of our favorite Guardians characters. It really felt like a true swan song for the whole team. But then there was the final post-credit scene that made some of us scratch our heads. And more specifically, the final text that followed, which read, "The legendary Star-Lord will return." So we're going to talk about how this ties specifically into the X-Men Avengers Secret Wars and could even show the return of Thanos.
Thanos?
Enjoy
No.
the mind game.
I'm here to kill Thanos.
And of course, along the way, as we're talking, feel free to let me know your thoughts on all of this down in the comments below. So at the end of Guardians 3, we see Star-Lord return to Earth to reconnect with his grandfather. And then in the post-credit scene, we see that Star-Lord is now living with his grandfather and discussing mundane things like mowing the lawn. And then in typical MCU fashion, we get a title card that promises a return. In Guardians 1 and 2, we got text that read the Guardians of the Galaxy will return. In the Avengers, we got text that read the Avengers will return, Civil War, Spider-Man will return. I could go on. But Guardians 3 promised only the return of one Guardian, Peter Quill's Star-Lord. Now, a little later, we'll talk about the other Guardians and if and when we'll see them again. But first, let's talk about the legendary Star-Lord and where he'll pop up next. Now, at first, this seems like just a gag, like Star-Lord's doing mundane things like eating Magic Spoon cereal, but we're still calling him legendary. But the title, the legendary Star-Lord, is the title of a comic line that served as a prelude to the 2015 Secret Wars comics. So in this comic, readers saw Star-Lord break from the Guardians team and go out on his own, which is exactly what we got in Guardians 3, Star-Lord leaving the team to return to Earth. Now, in the comic book, Star-Lord went toe-to-toe with his comic book father, Jason, the king of a planet called Spartax. But in the MCU, Star-Lord is the son of a celestial Ego, the living planet. But there is a fun wink and a nod to his comic father, Jason, with his grandfather being named Jason. Now, we've already seen this whole storyline somewhat adapted in Guardians 2 when Star-Lord battled Ego, but we don't really know much about his Earth family. So we can look into Star-Lord project focusing on Peter Quill's family history on Earth, right how the comics begin, his galactic lineage, and this could give us some insights as to why Ego chose Peter's mother specifically to give rise to an heir. For instance, there is that fan theory that since Meredith Quill and this random lady in USO show are played by the same actress, then maybe this is who Steve Rogers lost his virginity to. Captain America!
Language.
And Star-Lord had super soldier serum in his blood from his grandmother.
Okay, wait. Is the Star-Lord thing going to be the rest of this show or what?
Well, that's a great question, buddy. Marvel Studios has released their full Phase 5 lineup instead of Phase 6. Now, Phase 6 has 11 spots, 8 of which are currently unaccounted for. Phase 6 is Fantastic Four. And then we have 6 more projects for Avengers the Kang Dynasty. And then after that, we have 2 projects that will be Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars. So that'll be the final I think it is very likely that we'll be getting either a movie, a series, or a special presentation titled The Legendary Star-Lord, and I think this is going to be announced soon as part of the MCU's Phase 6. And my money is on it being a movie. Chris Pratt is a movie star, and yeah, he got his start on television with Parks and Rec, and he's done special presentations like the Guardians Holiday Special. But he's a really big star in Hollywood, and I think that we're going to see him headline his own feature film, a film where he is the title character Star-Lord.
Who? Star-Lord, man.
And this could cement him as a mainstay character for the MCU. With big characters like Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, and Black Widow no longer being around, Star-Lord can provide some familiarity as an OG MCU character. I mean, keep in mind that he's been around since Phase 2 of the MCU.
Well, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, I know, right?
Person, what's on your face?
This is my eye cream, my guy.
Well, you don't seem like the kind of guy who uses skincare.
Oh, dude, you have to use skincare. I mean, have you seen that picture of the trucker who didn't use sunscreen on half his face? I mean, I want to take care of myself. All did. Now, I like AM and P. It's all very, like at least 20. And Tej Hanley, I think of as Seth Rogen. Star-Lord is a goofy character, and Tej Hanley is offering Screen Crush viewers a hot deal. Click the first link in the description and you'll get 30% off your first box, plus a free gift. So let's talk about what this Star-Lord movie could look like. Star-Lord is a goofy character, and I don't really mean in a bad way. He's funny, he's immature, but he's also a very likable guy that you can't help but root for. When I think of what a Star-Lord movie could be, I think of a Seth Rogen stoner comedy, something like Superbad or Pineapple Express. And when you take into consideration Star-Lord's social status on Earth, a stoner comedy fits fits perfectly. I mean, think about it. In space, Star-Lord is an accomplished captain and a spaceship pilot. He's a deep space gunslinger. He's even a bit of a player with the space babes. But back on Earth, he's got none of that. He's a 40-year-old elementary school dropout who lives with his grandpa and is obsessed with rock bands from his childhood. I can see it now. Peter Quill, the weird guy who's back in town living with his grandfather, says that he's been to space and likes to go by the name Star-Lord. He drives around in an old van that he named Mercury after the lead singer of Queen, just like he named his past spaceships the Milano and the Benatar. Basically, he's Jack Black's character in School of Rock.
All I can say is, let's rock!
He drives around blaring 80s music on cassette tapes on his way to his new job at a corner store, bagging groceries. And hey, no disrespect to grocery bagging jobs, I think it's a step down from being a guardian of the galaxy. Now, I can see Peter going in for job interviews that he may very well be qualified for, but on paper, they would just be crazy to hire him. I could just hear him mentioning how he knows the Avengers and how he's fought aliens and helped save the galaxy a time or two.
Well, yeah, why doesn't it just join the Avengers?
Oh, buddy, you know, he might be wanting a break from the hero's life. And keep in mind that the Avengers he knows aren't exactly really around anymore. Tony's dead, Spider-Man's gone solo, Doctor Strange is off with Clea, and Thor's still in space. So this could all result in Quill becoming really defeated and alone. And then he could take up your stereotypical stoner character type of role, chilling in his grandpa's basement, eating Cheetos, playing Jedi Survivor. Check out our breakdown on that, by the way. He'd actually be getting to live the normal childhood that he never got on Earth. Only problem is he's 50.
50?
Sorry, 40. He's 40, and he has no ambitions. He feels like a failure. You get the gist. And then we could see him be met with a situation that calls for him to return to his hero ways. A situation that needs the legendary Star-Lord to return.
Or like Ken showing up or something?
Well, yeah, it's definitely going to be a situation I think that we'll see Star-Lord get involved with. But more on that in just a bit. For Star-Lord's movie, though, we've got two ideas. The first is a lot of fun, and it draws from the comics and helps to set up the X-Men, and it involves a heist.
A heist? No. The heists are Ant-Man's thing.
All right, true, but they were kind of Star-Lord and the Guardians thing first. Remember, we first met him when he was stealing the orb from Morak. Now, while Star-Lord and the other Guardians have grown as characters and are now more straightforward heroes instead of anti-heroes, there is still something a little more plucky about them than, say, the Avengers.
Don't call us plucky. We don't know what it means.
So I could see Star-Lord being recruited by a ragtag group of people on Earth looking to pull off some type of job that doesn't hurt anybody innocent, but is more in the vein of a Robin Hood type job, a job that would only negatively impact a bad guy, sort of like what Scott Lang did that got him sent to prison.
They were overcharging the customers, right? And it added up to millions. He blows the whistle and he gets fired. He hacks into the security system and transfers millions back to the people that they stole it from.
And that brings me to the mutant who's going to recruit him, Kitty Pryde. Now, Kitty Pryde was first introduced as a young teenager in 1980's Uncanny X-Men 129, and she has become a fan favorite amongst X-Men fans. In the legendary Star-Lord comics, we see Star-Lord and Kitty Pryde become romantically involved. Now, with the MCU now being able to use mutants and having already had several mutant mentions in non-X-Men projects, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the phasing mutant herself make her MCU debut in a Star-Lord movie.
Or won't they write and debut mutants in an X-Men movie?
Too late, my man. We already have multiversal mutants. And we also have a kind of confirmation that Wanda had mutant abilities when she was a child when she defused the Stark bomb.
Did you stop that bomb?
What?
Use the probability hacks.
Namor is also a mutant. He even uses the word.
The plant gave me wings on my ankles and ears that pointed to the clouds. I was a mutant.
And there's also the guy with big claws and a bar fight headline that we saw in She-Hulk. And of course, there's this.
Like a mutation.
Some mutants are already in this world, so why not Kitty Pryde? Now, before becoming a member of the X-Men, I could imagine that Kitty Pryde may have spent some time doing some Robin Hooding of her own. With the ability to walk through walls, she would make a perfect cat burglar. Plus, God, her name's Kitty and her alias in the comics is Shadow Cat. She'd be the perfect character to pull Star-Lord out of his funk, and then back into the gray area of an anti-hero for profit shenanigans like he used to do before forming the Guardians. We could see him having fun for the first time in a long time and starting to find his place on Earth. And with Star-Lord finally accepting that his Gamora is gone, we could see him and Kitty begin to fall for each other, like in the comics. But it's important that we don't let all these years of character development and growth for Star-Lord go to waste. So after a brief revisiting of his old Ravager ways and falling in love with Kitty Pryde, we could see him encounter a line that he isn't comfortable crossing, a line that begins to drive a wedge between he and Kitty's relationship. And this is the moment where we can see the tables begin to turn. Kitty was able to pull Star-Lord out of his funk, and now it's on Star-Lord to return the favor. He needs to show Kitty the path of the hero, encourage her to use her powers not only to hurt bad guys, but also also to help people in need, just like the Guardians do, thus starting her path to joining the X-Men. So the X-Men in the MCU could be assembled almost like the Avengers, with students slowly being introduced in different movies before finally coming together. So that's idea number one. Straightforward heist movie mixed with stoner comedy takes place on Earth. Now let's talk about idea number two. Like I mentioned before, the legendary Star-Lord comic was a prelude to the 2015 Secret Wars. Now that is the Secret Wars storyline that's going to heavily inspire the movie Avengers Secret Wars. So that's yet another reason I think we'll definitely be seeing this film happen in Phase 6. And it may even be one of the projects coming out between Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars. So we know that Kang Dynasty will very likely feature Kang coming to conquer the Earth. And I imagine that we'll see Star-Lord join the Avengers in their defense of Earth upon Kang's arrival. There's even a rumor that Sam Wilson will begin to reform the Avengers after the events of his movie New World Order. He could work as a kind of Nick Fury character, rallying all these different people who fought Thanos who are still on Earth. And remember, Star-Lord was there, although Sam wouldn't get a very good recommendation from Rudy.
So he's an idiot.
And I assume that he'll be the only Guardian on the team, or former Guardian, that we'll be seeing in Kang Dynasty.
Right, but what about Rocket and Groot? I mean, they got that new Guardians team, and what about Drax and Nebula? I mean, they're not coming back?
Well, buddy, they didn't break up the team for no reason. Nebula's Karen Gillian, Gamora's Zoe Saldana, and Dave Bautista's Drax the Destroyer have made it pretty clear that they don't plan to return to the MCU, at least not anytime soon. And while none of the characters were killed off, that wasn't necessarily so they could come back. It was so they could all have the happy ending that they deserved. And yes, we do have a new Guardians team, but I'm highly doubting that we'll see Guardians 4 until after Secret Wars and the Multiverse Saga. But I do think we'll see a big cosmic movie crossover based on the kick-ass comics Annihilation. But with that being said, it's been heavily implied that the Avengers Secret Wars will have damn near every Marvel character ever make an appearance in the film. So I think it's possible that we see at least a brief cameo of Drax and Nebula on Nowhere, Gamora and the Ravagers, and this new team of Guardians make at least a cameo appearance in Secret Wars. But at the same time, I kind of fear them having too many characters in Secret Wars, and this perfect ending for Nebula, Gamora, and Drax could be a great time to say bye to these characters indefinitely, at least until the universe is reset and they recast everybody Flash style.
Oh wait, what do you mean by that?
Sorry, let me back up. I do think that it's likely that Kang will win in Kang Dynasty like Thanos won in Infinity War, and then the Secret Wars movie will likely take place in a new universe where Kang has created Battle World. Now in the comics, Battle World was a patchwork of different realities ruled by God Emperor Doom. So change Doom to Kang, and you could have a planet that's filled with variants from all these different universes. So any film that takes place between Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars would either take place in the past, like Captain Marvel when it debuted before Endgame, or the movie could take place on Battle World. So we could see Peter roaming the wasteland, encountering Old Man Logan, Topher Grace Venom, I mean, you name it. But I think it's much more likely that we'll get a straightforward Star-Lord movie that explores the cosmic side of the MCU, which really we've barely seen. So the second idea that I had starts off as a heist movie / stoner comedy, very Earth-based. Peter's kind of hanging out, telling his grandpa about his wild times in space, but then a cosmic threat arrives.
Ooh, what cosmic threat? Is it Galactus or Timmy's Galactus?
It's the Celestials.
But that already happened in the Eternals.
Yeah, but stay with me. So the Eternals was It's one of those movies that are kind of like the Star Wars prequels that we'll look back on and appreciate for what it was. The movie wasn't terrible, but it was too much. Too many characters, too many weird plot lines, too many villains, tonally dissonant. I mean, look, you've read the reviews. Marvel was clearly hoping the Eternals would be a hit, so they set up a sequel with 2 post-credit scenes. Half of the team was taken away by the Celestials, so then they could judge whether or not Earth should live or die. And the other half of the team joined up with Star Fox and Pit Patrol to go find them.
Your friends are in big trouble. We know where to find them.
Now, I should note, this was all added like in reshoots. Chloe Zhao revealed that the original ending would have just been the Eternals waking up on a ship with their minds wiped, and Harry Styles is suddenly with them. And this is why the CGI on Pit Patrol looks so Quantumaniac. So it turned out the Eternals was not like the Oscar bait blockbuster that the studio was hoping for, so like a direct sequel seems unlikely. It would have been announced already. But what if instead we get to see these characters in a Star-Lord movie? I mean, a lot of you keep mentioning that there's a giant alien sticking out of the Earth's crust and nobody has said a word about it. So what if all those events of the Eternals didn't happen until a little later in the timeline, until after Guardians 3? So like Peter's eating cereal and then he sees this on the news. He recognizes that a celestial emergence almost happened on Earth, so he goes to investigate. He's lived in space his whole life. he knows what a celestial emergence is. After all, Peter is half celestial. Sure, the light inside of him is gone after Ego's death, so he has no special powers, but he is still one of their kin. And remember, Peter also used to live inside the skull of a celestial. He's the closest thing Earth has to an expert. So when Tiamat shows up in the sky to take away Circe and the others, Peter would know this is bad news. This is the third host arriving to judge a planet on whether or not it should live or die. So Peter would go off into space to find out what's up, and then he would run across Star Fox and the other Eternals, and then they would all venture to the Celestial Forge. And this is where Icarus could also return. After all, he is a robot, and like Cylons, there are many copies. And Thanos could also appear, and we could get some kind of clarification on this, like whether or not he was a robot who was just trying to stop the emergences of the Eternals by using the snap. Having Peter face off against a robot Thanos would give him a chance to redeem losing his temper the first time around.
Wait a minute, robot Thanos? What are you talking about?
Okay, this gets weird. In the comics, the Eternals are not space robots. They're highly evolved, perfect human beings. Basically, Thanos and Star Fox were both Eternals, but they were Eternals who grew up on Saturn's moon, Titan. The MCU changed Titan to a planet and revealed that Star Fox was both an Eternal and Thanos' brother. So, if the Eternals are all robots in the movie, then Robot Thanos, got it.
All that for a drop of blood.
All of this would also help Peter to finally reconcile with the fact that he is part God. The Celestials are in the midst of judging Earth because it failed to produce a celestial baby. And behold, the planet did produce a celestial baby without them even knowing about it. The Celestials might look at Star-Lord and decide this kooky little planet Earth might be worthy after all because it already produced an offspring for their race, a mutant offspring. And don't forget for a second that I forgot about Star-Lord's half-sister Mantis, who is also half-celestial. Mantis is one other Guardian who I do think we could see pop up at the end of Kang Dynasty and play a major role in Secret Wars. I mean, now she's in possession of 3 Abeles. These are creatures that can travel the multiverse. There's no way the multiverse ends without us seeing Mantis right in on an Abeles Boba Fett Rancor style.
Like a panther.
Like I said, she's also half celestial, was the MVP of Guardians 3, but I think we can save all that for another video. But I want to hear from you guys down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.
You never felt discriminated against?
I definitely did, but not because I was Asian.
Because of your inherent bad personality.
Exactly.
New York is overrated.
How many times have you been there?
Are we counting layovers?
What are they doing? They're being adorable.
You know, you're very
Mike. Where'd you go, girl?
Hey, welcome back to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy, and I'm here to talk about the best character in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Now, the movie was exceptional, the best MCU trilogy, and maybe the best Part 3 of any trilogy ever. I laughed, I cried, and I am excited for the future. But I think we may look back at this movie and remember it as the MCU movie that introduced Adam Warlock into the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
That himbo secondary villain?
But Doug Warlock is so much more than that. He has the potential to become the character of the cosmic side of the MCU, and we have thought of a way that his movie would be instrumental in how it ties into Kang, the Kang Dynasty, and Secret Wars. Seriously, we are so excited about how this can play out, and I can't wait to explain it to you. So I'm going to run through some of Adam's history in the comics. Now, we touched on this in our breakdown video, but we're going to have to go into way more detail here because this is going to be key in understanding what is next going forward for the movies. Then I'm going to talk about Warlock's potential solo movie and how it can tie into the Star-Lord solo movie that we talked about in this video, where Star-Lord teams up with the Eternals to face off against the Celestials. Cosmic stories are my favorite stories from the Marvel Comics, and I am very, very excited to see how all this plays out. And by the way, everybody, I want to show off this extremely cool Doug as Rocket tee, which is available in our merch store, and that's like 1% of Warlock's story in the comic. And shopping our merch store is a great way that you can directly support our channel. Now, back to what I was saying. So, what we saw in Guardians 3, that's like 1% of Warlock's story in the comics. The movie was actually pretty loyal to his early appearances. He is created by a group called the Enclave, who want to create a genetically perfect person. And unlike the High Evolutionary, they succeeded. But Adam came out of the cocoon kind of young and dumb. In his very second appearance, for example, he sees Lady Sif and says, yeah, I want to mate with her, and then Thor has to fight him to win Lady Sif back. Warlock also does this thing where if he dies or is near death, he creates a cocoon around himself. When the cocoon hatches, his memory is sometimes shaky, and he may have new powers. I guess he's a little bit like Doctor Who.
Let's go,
So in the comics, his cocoon was found by the High Evolutionary, who was just then building Counter-Earth. So in the comics, the High Evolutionary was trying to make any men for Counter-Earth, just like he does in the movie. And just like in the movie, these animals were way too violent. One of them was a mutated wolf who called himself the Man-Beast. So when the High Evolutionary actually finished Counter-Earth and was about to fill it with peaceful, perfect humans, the Man-Beast corrupted these humans so they would do evil things. This is also kind of what happens to Counter-Earth in the movie. So this makes Man-Beast kind of like the devil of this world.
And I'm the devil. Now kindly undo these straps.
So then writer Roy Thomas made Adam Warlock into the savior of Counter-Earth, more like the Messiah. He got a ragtag group of teens to follow him around and then introduced a Counter-Earth version of Dr. Doom and Reed Richards. Honestly, I think Thomas just liked having his own Earth to play with, where he could use like whatever characters he wanted and do new things with them.
You cannot control everything.
So Man-Beast becomes president of the United States, then sentences Warlock to death. Promise I'm not making any of this up. Adam is then crucified publicly, then is resurrected. He defeats the Man-Beast and ascends into outer space.
Yeah, that's pretty New Testament.
Yes, it is. So I doubt if we're going to see any of that in the movie, since Counter-Earth is now at Owen and Beru levels of crispy. But I'm telling you this to establish that being a religious figure is in the DNA of Adam Warlock. There's always societies who look to him as a kind of golden god. And it's also important to know that Adam always thinks of himself as a champion of life. See, Warlock is a character who is so powerful, the only person who can really defeat him is himself. And that is who's going to be the main villain of a Warlock movie.
He's gonna fight himself? This makes no sense. It's like when you tried to explain the Indian in Planet of the Apes.
Dude, that ending makes perfect sense, and so does this. Let me explain. So the best thing that ever happened to Adam Warlock the character was writer-artist Jim Starlin taking over his book. This is actually Jim Starlin and Endgame.
What about you?
Starlin was Marvel's cosmic mastermind for decades. He made these incredibly twisted, imaginative stories. He and writer Steve Englehart would drop acid and walk around the city dreaming up these wild concepts. Although, that's really dangerous. Don't do that.
Want to sell me death sticks?
I don't want to sell you death sticks.
You want to go home and rethink your life?
I want to go home and rethink my life.
So Jim Starlin began his run with Adam Warlock flying through space, and he encounters these soldiers from the Universal Church of Truth. Now, this is a massive galaxy-conquering religion that is a lot like the Spanish Inquisition. They conquer worlds and force the people into their way of life, which ironically is what the church is trying to preserve. They believe in the preservation of all life.
So they kill billions of people?
I cherish peace with all my heart. If I don't care about men, women, and children, I need to kill and get it.
They're an evil group, and they're ruled by this mysterious guy called the Magus, who at first appears as a giant head floating in space. Now, I should also mention that a key part of Warlock's story in the comics is the Soul Stone.
Hey, that's in the movies.
Yes, it is. Now, remember how in the movies the Soul Stone had a price?
Soul for a soul.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Well, that's because in the comics, the Soul Stone is this malevolent vampiric force that is always tempting Adam to consume souls, pulling him closer and closer to the dark side. Now, clearly, in the movies, the Soul Stone is no longer around.
But he used the stones to destroy the stones.
But I don't think the stones can be truly ever destroyed. Thanos says,
Produced an atom.
and the law of conservation of energy says that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only transferred. And the Infinity Stones are like made of the fundamental building blocks of the universe. So I've always thought that they would slowly reform over millennium. Anyways, Soul World still exists.
Soul World? That 70s funk dance show?
No, that's solid gold.
Fab Five ready, homie. Everybody fly. EJ said and I said bye-bye.
Soul World is the place where Gamora confronts Thanos at the end of Infinity War, and in a deleted scene where Tony met his daughter at the end of Endgame. So we can presume that even though the Soul Stone was destroyed, Soul World still exists. Now in the comics, Soul World is a kind of addictive paradise.
Oh, like the Nexus in Star Trek Generations.
Exactly. So Adam can still have a connection to Soul World in the movies because Soul World still exists. Maybe that gem in his head is an artificial soul gem that connects him to this plane of existence. I'm just spitballing here. I really want the Soul Stone to be part of the story. Now there's also two important supporting cast members in the comics, Gamora and Pip the Troll. So Gamora is like off the table for any Warlock movie because, you know. And Zoe Saldana seems to have no interest in returning to the MCU, but Pip the Troll was introduced in the Eternals. Pip is the perfect counterpoint to Adam Warlock. Warlock is very stuffy and stoic. Everything is very important. But Pip he's this little guy who smokes cigars and drinks beer and he likes to party. He grounds Adam in the real world. And more importantly, he gives Adam somebody to talk to. Now, it is possible that we could see Gamora replaced with another cosmic hero like Moondragon or even Mantis. But we actually have some way cooler theories of what Mantis can do that we're going to talk about in another video. So the big twist in this massive story is when Warlock finds out that the Magus is, in fact, his future self. Right? Yes, at some point in the future, Adam Warlock becomes evil, turns blue, gets an afro, and then founds the Universal Church of Truth. Here's how that goes down. Adam is pulled into this other dimension by a cosmic god called the In-Betweener. He spends like, thousands of years going insane, changing, being pulled between chaos and order. Then he re-emerges in his original reality, but years before his actual creation. So he founds this church whose goal is to protect life, a warped version of Adam's self-proclaimed goal to be a champion of life. So then the Magus has to set all these things into motion so his younger self will be pulled into the In-Betweener's dimension so he can turn insane and become the Magus. In other words, the Magus founds this church specifically to protect his own existence. Again, Warlock is the perfect man, but his absolute power is his greatest weakness because it can corrupt his soul and turn him evil. Now, all through this arc, Starlin writes these beautiful pages that are just filled with Adam thinking about things and where his place is in the universe and how he can possibly avoid becoming this evil entity. And then we see Warlock being tempted by the Soul Stone, then using it to steal people's souls, slowly being pulled into this life of an evil leader. But Warlock has an unlikely ally, Thanos. This is the beginning of their frenemy relationship that continues for decades. Sometimes they're arch enemies and sometimes they're forced to work together.
Yeah, but what's this got to do with anything?
Look, I know that Thanos is dead in the MCU, but trust me, this is going to matter later on. So in the comic, Thanos was very different. He worshipped death, so he's always trying to kill as many people as possible. He opposes the Magus because the Magus is a warped champion of life. So Thanos has invented this time portal which Warlock uses, and meanwhile, Thanos goes toe-to-toe with the Magus, two incredibly powerful forces battling it out. So Warlock enters the crossroads of time, kind of like the Palace of He Who Remains with like all these different branching realities. And then Adam is able to find the moment that the Magus was created, the moment when he turned evil. So Adam shows up and is forced to kill his future self. So now this means that past Warlock knows that he's just going to have to wait around for a while, watching his life turn to shit just so a past version of himself can show up to murder him. So then Thanos breaks bad, decides he wants to extinguish all the stars in the sky, so Warlock has to help the Avengers defeat Thanos, and during this fight, his past self shows up and kills him. But then he's able to live in Soul World with Pip and Gamora happily ever after. Now there's one other Warlock story that I think is going to be adapted from the comics. Warlock was a key part of the Infinity Gauntlet storyline, which is obviously not going to happen in the movies because it's already happened. But he was also key to the Annihilation books. So we went over these in our Guardians What's Next video. This was when a bug guy named Annihilus nearly destroyed every planet in the universe, and the event formed the modern iteration of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So in the aftermath, this race of sentient robots called the Phalanx began to assimilate the Kree Empire. Think the Borg, but like with no human parts.
You will be assimilated.
And the Phalanx were being led by Ultron, which, by the way, that villain should totally return at some point in the MCU.
We can talk about names, our favorite names, silly made-up names, normal names said in a silly voice with a...
So if you like classic Monopoly, you're going to love this. It's Monopoly on your phone. Now,
nice.
So in this story, Adam reunites with the High Evolutionary and works with Phi-La-Vell. Phi-La-Vell is a very important character in the comics. She's the daughter of Mar-Vell, the first Captain Marvel, and she's the little girl who's part of the new Guardians team that we see here. So Warlock has to team up with her and the High Evolutionary and eventually the Guardians of the Galaxy to stop Ultron and the Phalanx. But what's that got to do with the movies? Alright, so let's talk about how this can all be adapted into the movies. First of all, cross Phalanx off the list and write in Universal Church of Truth. We're going to combine these two storylines. So Guardians 3 ends with Adam finding a new family, the Guardians, like he does in the comics. But let's just say his solo movie begins with the Guardians on a mission, and then something happens. He loses control of his great powers. A voice calls out to him, distracts him, and he unleashes his full abilities, killing innocents. So for the good of the team, he has to leave them behind and find out whose voice was calling to him. Really investigate this darkness within his soul that's caused him to do these evil things. Now this is a lot like Wanda at the beginning of Civil War, except here, he leaves the team team for their own good. And you know what? Maybe Phyla-Vell comes along because they're friends now. She could actually be the Gamora character in this story. Adam runs across the Universal Church of Truth as they're conquering planets. Now, in our Star-Lord Returns video, we talked about how the Eternals could recruit Star-Lord, a half-Celestial, to save Circe and the other Eternals. Star-Lord would also want Tiamat and the other Celestials to spare Earth because, that's where he eats his cereal now.
Why would you want to save it?
Because I'm one of the idiots who lives in it! So Star Fox, the Eternals, Star-Lord, they're all out trying to save Earth from the Celestials. And you know what? Maybe they get captured by the Universal Church of Truth. Or maybe they're just not in this movie and Pip left the team to join Adam Warlock because he was bored. The point is, Adam gets captured by the church like in the comics, and they keep forcing him into these more and more desperate situations where he has to do bad things to save people. And I want to reiterate here that Pip the Troll has to be in the Warlock movie. You need this weird little burping guy to be a counterpoint to this perfect godlike man.
My ears! My eyes are numb.
So remember, emotionally, Adam is basically a blank slate at this point. In Guardians 3, he was only following the High Evolutionary's orders to save his race. And after he shows the Ravager that he means business, Adam proclaims that he feels bad after doing this. I mean, remember, he's only like 5 weeks old. He's still learning how to feel. So he would be very susceptible to the dark side. He would be using his power for what he thinks is the greater good, all the while he's actually slowly becoming the Magus. And this is where he will get an unlikely helper. In the comics, it was Thanos, but in the movies, we got two options. One, it could be the High Evolutionary who maybe didn't die at the end of Guardians 3. But a more fun option is that he gets help from the MCU's new big bad, Kang the Conqueror. But he's dead. We saw him die. Doug, he's not dead. Come on. Ant-Man gets in a lucky punch and then sends him into a machine that creates portals to the entire multiverse. He's still alive. He may be recast, but that's a topic for another video. Now, I do think we need Kang to be a truly threatening villain before we see him in the Kang Dynasty. Right now, he's 0-1 against some ants. He needs to rack up a huge victory to make him seem like a real threat before the next movie. Remember, Kang is trying to conquer the multiverse to prevent its destruction.
I saw the multiverse, that it was dying, so I took control.
So let's just say the Universal Church of Truth stands in the way of that conquest. Maybe their actions will end the timeline, causing it to spiral out of control. Or, and this is a lot better, I think Kang would join forces with Warlock because he's actually playing a game of 3D chess to trick Adam Warlock into destroying himself. How's it do that? Alright, so let's say that Kang meets Warlock and they're fighting the church and the Magus together. Now Warlock knows that time is running out. It's only a matter of time before he's pulled into another dimension, goes insane, and becomes the Magus. So Kang, a time traveler, tells him that he can actually send Adam into the time stream to end his own life, so he never turns evil. And then, as Adam's doing that, we would get to see Kang face off against the Magus to show that he's so powerful that he can go toe-to-toe with the variant of Adam Warlock. And then Adam goes into his future, finds himself the moment before he turns evil, and he ends his own life. So then, all through the next movies, all through Avengers the Kang Dynasty, we're all going to be waiting for that moment when a past version of Warlock shows up to kill his future self. And that moment arrives at a point when Warlock is actually about to defeat Kang. So let's say Kang is trying to rewrite all of reality, conquer Earth, all that good stuff. And Adam's connection to another plane of existence, like Soul World, makes him the key to stopping Kang, or whatever the reason is. Adam Warlock is the only person who can defeat Kang at this moment. But the moment Adam defeats Kang is the moment he turns to the dark side. This is the moment when he uses his absolute power absolutely, and he becomes corrupt and turns into the Magus. Afterwards, he would use Kang's time travel technology to go into the past and form the Universal Church of Truth. So Kang has actually tricked Adam Warlock into traveling into the future to kill himself, because Warlock is the only character who's strong enough to kill Warlock. So after Warlock kills himself, Kang has no Magus to challenge him, and he can finish his conquest. And all because he used the time stream to manipulate his enemies. And then, of course, comes Secret Wars, with variants of all these heroes populating Battleworld, but that is for another video, where we think that Mantis is going to be key to saving the entire multiverse from Kang. What do you guys think of our Warlock theory? Do you want to see a Warlock solo film? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And first time here,